going around in a circle until you arrived back at the symbol from which you started from. So all these symbols are kind of leaning on one another, and they're all completely neutral. It's your interpretation of those symbols that's actually helping manifest your experience. It's not actually the symbol itself. It's just there to provide, like as a vessel, you could say, as a carrier. Okay, so I want to give the definition of a word here, because what's going on in the currency is we've discovered that when we have an occasion that we experience that is momentous, there's some value that's there, and we like to make records of an occasion that we feel that holds a lot of value to us. So just like right now there's video cameras and pictures, and some people do different types of art because we like to make some type of record of an experience that we're having, and that record is a representation of our experience, right? Our experience is the present, and then we like to make a record, and that becomes a representation. And so that's kind of what happened here, is like we're using this representation to reflect a value of something that's actually intangible. When we're talking with one another, we're exchanging information, but all of a sudden we want to kind of like, oh, let's, we've got these ideas going on, let's write it down. When we write it down, we're actually making a representation of that present moment that we were experiencing, because we wanted to reflect the value, just like the flower reflects the seed. There is no dividing, like, let's say if there was two people that held ownership in something, and there was like a contract or an agreement put in place that there was two people that held ownership interest in something, and that thing held some value, let's say, of like $100. Because there's actually two perspectives of it, there's actually $200 there. And this is kind of the root of the monetary system, that you may only see $100 appear on that piece of paper, but if there's three names on there, if there's two names, there's actually $200. If there's three names, there's $300. And so we're seeing those it's kind of like we're seeing the exact same things that occur in nature going on in this little card game that we're playing with right now. And it's all it is. It's just a game. If we could be really lighthearted about it and say, look, we're just playing cards here, and we're moving these pieces of paper back and forth to try to help move value around in the currency. So, okay, so one word I want to focus on is the actual word. And what does that word entail? In Black's Law Dictionary, which is an official law book, a word is a symbol that indicates an idea and is subject to contraction and expansion in order to reach the idea that is sought to be expressed. So let me just say that again a little slowly, because what we're going to see in the definition here is the word is actually mimicking the breath. Is that there is this idea of contraction, which is simplifying and going inward. And that happens in our mind when we choose to adopt beliefs. We consider ideas, and then we say, you know what, I think this is this way. When we make a statement, we're actually measuring the infinite. When you measure the infinite, you're actually pressing something down because you're judging. When you make a judgment, it's kind of like going like this, lower and lower and lower. And sometimes we get so lost in our judgments, we think that our judgments is actually how reality really is. But it's actually a result of the beliefs that we have, or the ideas that we've considered throughout time in our mind, that we've said, yes, go ahead, make it so. This is this way. We are limiting by making statements. Any sentence that you say in your head or out to someone with a period at the end, when you say something is some way, it's just like me calling my hand a hand. As soon as I identify this right here as a hand, it's almost like there's a negative that appears around here that says this is not a hand. And then if I'm opening my mind and I say this is a hand, this is also, the color peach, there's like blood cells in there, and if I think really freely, I could say, yeah, it's everything, and it's nothing, and it's blue, it's all these different things. But in order for me to make that hand whole again, I have to say like every word and every idea that's ever existed. An easier way to go back to making this hand whole is to cease to call it a hand and just go back into curiosity, into question, and just say, what is it? Because when we operate in curiosity and discovery and the question, we kind of back off from our fixation of that one idea, of how we think about it. And so I guess like that's what we want to be mindful of. It's not just don't make judgments, don't establish beliefs, but actually be mindful that when you establish a belief, you're going to be creating an experience for yourself in the present and in the future. So just be mindful that, okay, how strong is my belief in what this is, because I know it's really infinite, and I'm just I'm just making a statement or I'm making a judgment so I can build a structure in my head so I can have a specific type of experience. So I'm going to read that definition again and just picture that in your mind that, you know, what I'm saying here. A word is a symbol that indicates an idea and is subject to contraction and expansion in order to reach the idea that's sought to be expressed. And so in language, we could think of contraction as a statement, as a judgment, and we could think of expansion as a question. Okay, so it's simple for us sometimes to look at like an art structure or a painting or something, and wow, look at the beauty, look at the fantasy involved in that. But these fantasies are actually locked inside every system that's in our body. And some of these systems are these systems of law, finance, and government that maybe they don't need to change. Maybe our perspective of what they are needs to change if we choose to tune it to that direction. So I'm going into, okay, so let me just finish that real quick. So yeah, contraction and expansion. Okay, so a word is a symbol indicating an idea and subject to contraction and expansion in order to reach the idea that is sought to be expressed. And this is what we're constantly doing in our mind every day. Okay, just some other interesting definitions is the word symbol, which is a sign, a token, or a representation of one thing by another. That's another example that anytime we are using a symbol to indicate an idea, we are entering into a realm of fiction. We could be poor sports and say, oh, I just want to get out of the realm of fiction. I just don't want to be in this fiction world anymore, whatever. The government's fraud, it's BS or whatever. That's fine, let it be fraud. It's just a game. It's just like poker, it's just like Monopoly. It's just that it's a game that we play to help exchange value with one another, and it's used as a medium of exchange. When I have a cow and someone else has 30 chickens and I don't need any chickens, but they need a cow, there's got to be some common medium that's there so that we can help facilitate transfers more harmoniously and more quickly. So that's why that symbol is there of money. Okay, moving now just a little bit more into detail. From symbols we can get into terms, right? And we know that like a term is kind of like a word with like a definition. We also hear the terms of a contract. Well, in contraction, that word is when you're actually forming an agreement. And we all have contracts all over the place. We have contracts with our clothing, we have contracts with all our friends and all the relationships and our coworkers and everything, and also how we interpret reality. These are all agreements that we've established. So let me just read the definition of a term real quick, which is a word or phrase, an expression, particularly one which possesses a fixed and known meaning in some science, art, or profession. A fixed period. That's the thing, is when we get into the word term, a term is a synonym for time or a period. So it's like automatically when we're using words, it's being used to help facilitate the movement of time, this idea of time. Some other symbols real quick, or some other words. The word thesaurus, the meaning of the word thesaurus actually translates to treasury. So if you're wondering, well, how can I help facilitate this exchange of my inner world to my outer world, and how do I make that as smooth as possible? Well, recognize that language is your treasury. And so how wealthy are you in the way you can convey information? And yes, can we convey information and can convey energy without using symbols? Absolutely, we're always doing it all the time. But sometimes we like to, again, make a record, and then we like to celebrate in a way. And talking is a form of celebration of our communication to one another, because we know what's going on an intangible level as well. Okay, so a thesaurer is a treasurer. And, okay, so going into a couple other words real quick. A dictionary, a collection of words and phrases. And diction actually means of word. And it's kind of funny because some of the scriptures out there are called the word. So it's just like the symbol. The word juris means of right. And so jurisdiction, means of right and of law. So the word jurisdiction actually means of word, of right, and of law. So this is a big sea of space that we have going on here, And because there's a lot of different agreements put in place in a lot of different cultures, we're kind of just always looking to honor all the different types of cultures. And so how are we to recognize which plane of language we can communicate on, so that we can actually communicate clearly, our message clearly, to another position, you know, from one person to another. We do that through, let's see, where was I going with this here? Okay, so there's different jurisdictions basically that are in place all around the world, and we can go ahead and say, yes, there's a union that is this giant jurisdiction, like a unity, but also on a more specific level, we don't want to negate from the culture and the diversity of creation. So we want to honor kind of all different forms of customs of how we can experience reality. And so there's kind of systems of law that are set up, which are fixed into layers, so that we can navigate through the different customs. And so most of us are kind of